I'm going to post a real quick review of the Giant XTC Advanced. This is the Model 2. So I'm at a bike demo, a Giant bike demo. First time ever on a Plus bike, and I've had a lot of people ask me about plus size bikes, so I'm going to put my GoPro on and talk through how the bike feels. I just want to show it up close here. Of course, it is a 27.5. It's got Schwalbe tires on it. Schwalbe Rocket Rons, and they're plus size, so they are fat. And it's got SRAM. It's got a 1x11 drivetrain, and it's the NX. Never ridden this component group. I've ridden the higher end SRAM. It's got Giant's own cockpit, so Giant Connect bar, Giant Connect stem. Pretty short stem. So this is a, let's see if we can see what this is. So 60 mil stem. And it does have a dropper seat post on it. So that's kind of cool. It's got a RockShox Reba fork. So not a real high-end spec bike, but I think it's going to be great for a lot of riders out there. Carbon frame, so full carbon frame. This is a medium. I'm 5'8" and a half, and I ride a medium Giant. It fits me really well. And this is a Giant Contact SL seat or saddle. I have one of these on my Trance. I actually took it off. Saddles are so personal. Some saddles feel great on people, some hit some pressure points. This saddle actually hit a pressure point on me on my Trance, so I just recently pulled it off. This bike comes with SRAM level TL brakes, and it's time to put the GoPro on and really talk through how this bike rides. My first experience with the plus size bike is extremely positive. No pun intended there. But man, this thing has traction. I don't know if you can tell in the video, but there's a lot of loose leaves and pine straw on the trail right now. And these tires just roll it over this stuff. And I don't even know how much traction I really have. It would take me a while. But holy cow. So it's still a hardtail. No suspension, but I mean, my first reaction is if I ever got another hardtail, it would be a plus bike. So let me just talk through some of the components on here. First, the stem is a 60, and I think that's a really good spec. I would normally run a little bit longer on a cross-country bike, but because the tires are fatter and they're probably a little bit slower, the 60 mil stem is a good spec. The bars feel like a really good cross-country width. Not as wide as my Trance, but good width. The SRAM shifters are really, really crisp. Super positive feel on the shifters on this bike. It's a really good spec bike. I don't even know the retail price on this one. I'll check it out when I get home, but yeah, I'm not really missing higher end specs on this bike. Let's see what it does in here. Where you normally lock up your wheel, it just doesn't lock up. It just grips. Wow. I'm still a full suspension guy, but man, it does have some give on the bumps compared to a normal hardtail. I even let a little PSI out of the tires before I started rolling. I just went by feel. Wish I would have brought my pressure gauge, but I didn't. But man, and you know what's interesting on this bike is it still accelerates well. Like I thought a plus tire would just drag on the acceleration. I'm gonna punch it up this little section. Not long enough. Wow, it's a good accelerating bike. I would love to do a time trial test on this bike. This is the kind of bike you would really have to spend a week or two of riding before you started getting your mojo on it. I love carving turns really hard with a lot of traction, and this bike does it. I mean, those quick little hard turns, these tires stay glued to the trail. I'm really impressed. And the carbon frame feels so good on this bike. It's not overly stiff. It's kind of hard to really see how stiff the frame is with the Plus tires, but you know what, the Plus tires don't feel like they are too mushy and wallow around. I've heard people say that with Plus tires, the sidewalls just kind of give a little bit. I haven't really noticed that yet. I'm pretty light, so I don't know if a heavier rider would kind of roll these tires more. But the Reba fork feels pretty good. I'm a Fox guy. This fork doesn't feel as kind of plush as my fork, but you know, I don't know what the pressures are set at. I'd have to really dial it in to my settings, but the fork feels stiff. And these are, I believe, alloy wheels. But yeah, I'm surprised at how kind of stiff the bike feels in the corners in a very good way. It doesn't feel like the bike wanders around in the corners. Some climbing here. Feels great out of the saddle, you know, because it is a hardtail. It goes when you get out of the saddle. So this is the first hardtail that I've ever jumped back on after being on full suspension, and I didn't feel like I was getting the crap beat out of me. The tires do feel springy. I could see if it was rocky where they might not hold a line quite as well. There he is. That was my buddy that I was riding with earlier. So yeah, I can see how rocky terrain would maybe throw these tires off the line, but they would also absorb some of the chatter. On really hard cornering, I can feel the tires give a little bit, but the payoff with the extra traction and the extra plushness is definitely worth it. I think the best way to describe this bike is it's very lively but also very stable. So when you're springing back and forth between corners, it jumps pretty well back and forth without feeling like you're going to slip out. And I think Giant has really gotten the geometry of this bike tuned really well for plus size tires. I don't even know what the geometry numbers are on this bike, but it feels great. Definitely more stable than my 29er full suspension cross-country bike. That bike feels like a lot of times it can slide out on you. Very good geometry in that one too, just a little twitchy for the average rider. But this bike feels really, really stable. Like I can do these turns right here. Yeah, see, I feel like this bike would be faster than a standard hardtail. I would have said you're crazy if you told me that before I rode this thing. But you can rail this thing. All right, I'm going to wrap up this review by giving my initial thoughts of who would benefit from this kind of bike. And it's hard for me to say because I've only spent a little time on it. Let me say one more thing though. The front end does feel a little heavy. I don't know if it's the wheels, the rims, or what, but it does feel a little bit heavy. But not too bad. So who is this bike for? Well, anybody who has a hardtail in their budget, because that's what their budget allows. Man, I'd go for a plus bike like this if full suspension was a little out of your budget. Someone who rides loose stuff a lot, like the race I did this morning, there were a couple climbs where I was on the verge of slipping out. I think this bike would be just, I mean, it wouldn't even phase it. So I think this bike will be good for the racer who only has one bike, who needs just a more versatile bike than a full-on hardtail race rig. This bike could be it, because even though my legs are too zapped from racing this morning to do a time trial, I think the times would be really good, especially after you get some time on this bike and really get used to the way it handles. I don't know about switching between a plus size bike and a regular. They feel pretty different, and I think to get the most out of it you need to kind of stick with one tire. That's just my initial opinion. Just want to throw that out there. Here's some pine straw. Wow. Yeah, love the 60 mil stem. Perfect spec on this bike. So who else would this bike be for? Trail riders who don't ride really rugged stuff. Now the head angle in this bike feels a little slacker than my cross-country race bike, so it feels really stable in the corner. So it's going to make a pretty good trail bike for someone who doesn't ride really gnarly stuff. Again, I just think the versatility of this bike is probably its strong point. So yeah, that's my review of the XTC Advanced Plus size bike. One that I can recommend, and this model, the 2, is a really well spec bike. I didn't mention the brakes yet. Let me mention the brakes. They feel great. I don't feel a huge difference between my XT brakes, and you know, if you know my love for XT brakes, you'll know that I really like the power and the modulation, and these brakes feel really good. So this is a very well spec bike. I don't think you'd have to upgrade this bike very much. You know, maybe some carbon wheels to really just bling it out, but then you could get this bike and just hit the trail and be a happy camper. So thanks for watching this review, and if you have any questions or comments, leave them below. Thanks for watching.